Hello and welcome to the Pilgrim Way. My name is Norman Graham and I'm a minister in the Baptist Union of Churches in Scotland. The aim of these signposts is to try and help to connect the text of the Bible with our everyday lives. Welcome to our series on the Sermon on the Mount, and I'm going to read a few verses from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 5 today, from verse 33 to 37. Again you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made." But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. Well, in these verses, Jesus deals with an important issue of his day, but one that at first glance modern readers might struggle to really connect with, swearing or making an oath. However, behind the principle of not swearing oaths is the idea of honesty, truthfulness and integrity of character that makes oath swearing or oath taking unnecessary. In an age of fake news and dishonesty and corruption at the highest levels of society, these concepts are even more urgent today than perhaps they were in the first century. Oaths are perhaps an old-fashioned thing, and so I should probably say that an oath is a promise, or a verbal promise or guarantee of something that's said, or of an action in the past or the future. The tradition that Jesus refers to regarding oaths in verse 33 was really a composite of various First Testament texts on the subject, particularly Leviticus 19 and 12, Numbers 30 verse 2 and Deuteronomy 23 verse 21. Together they allowed for the practice of taking an oath or making a vow in God's name, but they also warned that to do so falsely or to fail to keep such a vow would result in judgment from God. And Jesus uses two different but quite related Greek terms that help us to understand the nature of oaths and why they were so important. And the first is a Greek verb that means to perjure oneself, to make a false statement or promise. And the second is from a noun that literally means to enclose or to bind together. Now, taken together, these terms suggest that an oath is sworn invoking the name of something or someone greater than the person swearing the oath in order to give credibility to the oath. You're binding yourself to the person or thing by which you've sworn. Or as the writer to the Hebrews puts it, people swear by someone greater than themselves, and the oath confirms what is said and puts an end to all argument. It used to be the case in the United Kingdom that in court a person would swear in God's name to tell the truth, even laying their hand upon a Bible as they made that oath. In doing so, they were inviting God to be a witness to the truthfulness of what they were about to say, and by implication they invited the judgment of God upon themselves if they spoke falsely. It was such an oath that gave their testimony added credibility. But of course, such a practice is only useful provided people actually believe that God exists and that he punishes wrongdoing, including bearing false witness. If God's name was used in an oath, it was understood that his dignity and honour were at stake, and so punishment would follow against oath breakers. But none of that matters, I guess, if you don't believe in God in the first place. You can make an oath by anyone's name, by God's name, and then just lie if you don't believe in the person or the thing to which you've sworn your oath. So oaths, especially oaths taken in God's name, were not simply a matter of truthfulness or integrity, but also of divine judgment in ancient times, and even in our legal system at one point. In the ancient world, swearing an oath was a very serious issue and was a practice that appears to have been sanctioned by God. Leviticus 19 and 12 allows the use of God's name in making oaths. Abraham made his servant Eliezer swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that he would not find a wife for Isaac from the Canaanites. Psalm 132 verse 22 tells us that David swore an oath to the Lord and vowed to the Mighty One of Jacob. Even God himself swore an oath on certain occasions. For example, in Genesis 22 verses 16 and 17 we read, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. So, on the whole, oath-taking seems to be approved by God and by Scripture. So why then does Jesus effectively forbid the practice here in Matthew 5? Well, firstly, the whole concept had become corrupted. By the 1st century, many rabbis had developed a highly structured hierarchy of oaths, and some of them suggested that an oath was only really binding if it was made in the name of the Lord. If someone swore by a less sacred thing, such as heaven or Jerusalem, which is why Jesus mentions them here, they might consider the oath wasn't binding and could therefore be broken without penalty. In the 1st century, of course, swearing by your head was a way of saying that you swore upon your own life. But since you don't even have the power to change the colour of one hair on your head, it's a kind of pointless oath. In other words, the people of Jesus' day didn't mind making oaths as long as there were plenty of loopholes that enabled them to get out of keeping them. In addition to that, oaths were being used for the most trivial of things and had actually devalued them to the point of being oaths themselves became almost meaningless. In effect, oaths had become a form of manipulation designed to override the good judgment and will of the person being addressed. They'd simply become a means of getting your own way. It's also been suggested that making a false oath was equivalent to taking God's name in vain. But even swearing by God's name is futile because, as Eugene Peterson points out, God cannot be manipulated by our use of language. Prayer, the opposite of swearing, he says, is language put in the service of God, not in the service of ourselves. And secondly, I think Jesus forbids it here because, and I think this is Jesus' main point actually, integrity is more important than oaths. In the face of false oaths, corruption, deceit, manipulation, and so on, Jesus demands that his followers should be so known for their integrity and truthfulness that making oaths is unnecessary. He says that their yes or no should be enough without the need for them to swear an oath. As Craig Keener writes, the point is that since God witnesses every word that we say anyway, we should be able to tell the truth without having to call on God to witness by a formal oath. And it's on this second point, I think especially, that Jesus' command specifically intersects with our lives in the 21st century. While swearing oaths is quite simply not an issue in our culture, except perhaps in a legal setting, the lack of integrity, honesty and truthfulness is an issue of great concern to most people, because hypocrisy and dishonesty have become endemic within our culture. Surveys suggest that the vast majority of us no longer have any confidence in traditional institutions of authority. We no longer trust our doctors or lawyers, the police, and especially not our religious or civic and political leaders. Scandal after scandal in society and within the church has eroded any trust that we had. Quite simply, our civic and religious leaders have been proven again and again to be corrupt and unworthy of our trust. 2022 will be known for many things, but a flood tide of lies and corruption within the very highest levels of government, dishonesty and criminality within the police, misogyny and racism within the fire service, and abuse within the church, they'll all be among the things for which this year will be remembered. For example, Boris Johnson's premiership was mired in claims of corruption on a massive scale, and of creating a culture of lying that was so widespread that, according to one well-respected political journalist, it became all but impossible for an honest politician to survive, let alone flourish, in Boris Johnson's government. And that does not seem to have changed much with the now 2 prime ministers that have followed him. Now, I say that not in order to be politically contentious, but to make the important observation that if the most powerful people in the land are renowned, are known for their dishonesty, for not keeping their word, and polling seems to suggest that the majority of us don't believe that they do keep their word, well, if they're known for that, what hope do the rest of us have? Trickle-down economics may not work, but trickle-down morality does. It is well understood that leaders, whether it's in government or in other institutions such as education and schools and universities, or the police or the fire service or the church, leaders in these institutions set the tone for everyone else's behaviour. I've often said from the pulpit that leaders in the church have to model the very life that they are calling the congregation to live. By shamelessly practicing dishonesty and deceit, our leaders give us permission to do the same. How good it would be to say that followers of Jesus are different, that our world is the gold standard and can always be trusted because we only ever speak the truth. It would be good to be able to say that, but it would also not be true. We don't need surveys to tell us that Bible-believing, Christ-professing Christians are just as prone to dishonesty and untrustworthiness as non-Christians, because we know that from our own personal experience. The sad fact is that in reality, Christians are as prone to be dishonest and not keep our word, to not speak the truth as anyone else. And whilst we might not be like that all the time, we are all at times like that. We don't mind very much if we have to tell a little white lie, especially if it gets us out of a jam or spares us some embarrassment. But there actually is no such thing as a little white lie. Deceit is deceit. A lie is a lie. How easily we forget that when we lie to cover our own wrong motives, we forget that one day God will expose all the secrets of our hearts anyway. Matthew 10:26 tells us there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. As someone tweeted recently, perhaps we wouldn't need to keep telling people we are Christians if our lives already made that fact plain to see. When Jesus says here that for his disciples yes must be yes and no must be no, he's saying that in the strongest terms we must always speak the truth without any need to swear by anything or anyone, to make an oath of any kind, like, God's my witness or honest to God. Christ's followers should have such a good reputation that it's totally unnecessary for them to swear an oath of any kind to validate or give authority to what they say. Our word should be so reliable that nothing more need be said, and anything more than that, Jesus says, is from the evil one. Of course, experience teaches us that being consistently truthful can be very difficult and very painful. In Tolkien's epic The Lord of the Rings, the riders of Rohan were known for their honesty, that they kept their word, they kept their oaths, or died in the attempt. All too often we lie or make false promises because we don't want anyone to think badly of us, or we don't want to get in trouble. Perhaps we don't want anyone else to get in trouble. But the integrity that Jesus demands means that we must always take responsibility for our words and our actions, even if the consequences are unpleasant or painful for us. It may be painful for other people, even to hear the truth from us. And I would guess that the vast majority of our little white lies are told as much to spare someone else embarrassment as to spare it for ourselves. I mean, what do you say when your wife or girlfriend asks you, does my bum look big in this? Always speaking the truth can cause problems in our relationships with others. Of course, we should also remember that the truth is not a blunt instrument with which to beat people into submission to our point of view. And just because something is true doesn't necessarily mean we have the right to say it, and we ought to be able to speak the truth in such a way that it doesn't come across as mean or spiteful and doesn't cause hurt. If you've ever watched The Big Bang Theory, you'll know that Sheldon is pathologically incapable of telling a lie, even when he says the most offensive, hurtful and demeaning things to others. In his mind, they're not offensive or hurtful or demeaning because they're the truth. But apart from the fact that they are hurtful, they are often not so much objective facts, but are rather just the truth from Sheldon's perspective. Jesus' call for trustworthiness in our speech is not permission to force our version of the truth into the lives of other people. And just because we think something is true does not make it so. It's always worth remembering Daniel Moynihan's famous quotation that you are entitled to your opinion, but you are not entitled to your own facts. Rather, what Jesus means here is that if you're asked a question, answer truthfully, even if the answer is costly to you. If you say that you'll do something, then do it. Don't make false promises that you have no intention of keeping. Followers of Jesus must understand, as Bonhoeffer puts it, that there is no truth towards Jesus without truth toward other people. Lying destroys community. There is no following Jesus without living in the truth unveiled before God and other people. The very people that we are trying to reach with the truth of the gospel of Jesus are sick and tired of the dishonesty of politicians and others in positions of power and authority. And they are hurt and they are broken by the dishonesty of others in their personal relationships, and even by their own dishonesty. Now we have an opportunity to offer an alternative way and to proclaim the gospel by being known as people of honesty, truthfulness and integrity, because we follow the one who is the embodiment of truth itself. And it's perhaps stating the obvious to say that if we are known to be untruthful about small things, then no one will believe us when we speak about the big things, like the truth of the gospel that Jesus is the saving King. If we claim to be his followers, then whenever we speak in his name, whether we use his name or not. Thanks for listening.